Why Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world. And what if I told you those words are from a religion most of the world misunderstands? Yes, Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world today. But the question is, why? Why in an age of skepticism, when faith is fading in so many places, are people entering Islam in record numbers? Let's open the first door. Simplicity. Islam is beautifully simple. It's not a complicated philosophy reserved for scholars in ivory towers. It's not an exclusive club for a chosen race or nation. It's a message for everyone. At its heart, Islam says there is one God, and He alone deserves your worship. That's it. No endless debates, no layers of confusion. Just one creator, one purpose, one direction. And in a world drowning in noise, that clarity feels like oxygen. Now, the second door, equality. In Islam, it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, black or white, educated or uneducated. When you stand in prayer, shoulder to shoulder, all labels vanish. A billionaire stands beside a janitor, a professor beside a farmer, all bowing to the same Lord. Isn't that what humanity craves? A place where worth isn't defined by skin, status or salary, but by sincerity. The third door answers. Real answers. People are tired of being told that life is meaningless, that morality is relative, that death is the end. Islam doesn't shy away from the big questions. Why am I here? To worship God. What is my purpose? To live with justice, mercy, and humility. What happens after death? A return to the one who created you, and accountability for how you lived. These answers don't suppress the mind, they free it. They don't kill curiosity, they satisfy it. The fourth door, discipline and transformation. Have you ever noticed how many new Muslims describe Islam as a lifestyle, not just a belief? They talk about how fasting in Ramadan taught them self-control, how daily prayers grounded them in gratitude, how giving charity shifted their hearts from greed to generosity. In a world obsessed with self-indulgence, Islam trains the soul to rise above the ego. Isn't that the kind of transformation people secretly long for? The fifth door, authenticity. Think about it. In Islam, the Qur'an is preserved exactly as it was revealed over 400 years ago. Not a word changed, not a letter altered. Millions have memorized it cover to cover. Where else in history do you see a book guarded so perfectly? For seekers of truth, that authenticity is magnetic. It says here is a message untouched by time, pure and unfiltered. And finally, the sixth door, peace. At its core, Islam offers something humanity has been searching for since the beginning of time: inner peace. People describe it as if a weight they carried for years is suddenly lifted, a calm that settles the storms inside. One convert said, "It felt like I came home after being lost my whole life." That's what Islam does. It brings you home. So, why is Islam the fastest growing religion in the world? Because in a time of confusion, it brings clarity. In a time of division, it brings unity. In a time of emptiness, it brings meaning. And in a time of chaos, it brings peace. And here's the part most people don't realize. Islam doesn't spread through force. It spreads through hearts. Through conversations, kindness, neighbors, co-workers, friends. Through people who live with integrity and whose character becomes a silent invitation. So when you walk away from here today, I want you to carry this truth with you. Islam isn't growing because of politics or power. It's growing because it speaks directly to the human soul. And that, my friends, is unstoppable. You are not just listening to statistics, you are witnesses to history. And maybe, just maybe, you are standing at the door of truth yourself. Because Islam isn't just the fastest growing religion in the world. It's the fastest growing awakening of hearts. Islam grows because of its simplicity: one God, one purpose, one direction. It creates equality by erasing divisions of class, race, and status in worship. It provides real answers to life's deepest questions. It transforms lives through discipline, prayer, fasting, and charity. Its authenticity attracts seekers. The Qur'an has been preserved word for word. It offers the deepest human need, inner peace and a sense of coming home. Imagine a person standing in the middle of a crowded street, Noise coming from every direction. People shouting, advertisements flashing, decisions pulling them left and right. That is what life feels like for so many today. An endless stream of choices, philosophies, and voices all demanding attention. It is overwhelming. It is exhausting. And in that chaos, people crave something clear, something simple, something that doesn't confuse them further, but brings them back to the essence of existence. This is where Islam enters, not as another layer of noise, but as a voice of profound simplicity that cuts through everything else. At its heart, Islam is not tangled in philosophical riddles or rituals that only the elite can grasp. It is not about long chains of debate that leave ordinary people lost in complexity. It is a direct call to the soul. There is one God, and He alone is worthy of worship. That's it. That is the anchor, the foundation, the core. And for someone lost in confusion, this message feels like oxygen after drowning. I once listened to a young woman tell her story of conversion. She said she had read about dozens of religions, flipping through pages of doctrines, and trying to piece together a picture of God. But the more she read, the more complicated it felt. Different interpretations, endless theological debates, rules that seemed to contradict themselves. It made her want to give up searching altogether. Then one evening, she stumbled upon a simple translation of the Qur'an. The very first chapter, Al-Fatiha, began with 7 short verses. All praise is due to God, Lord of the worlds, the most merciful, the most compassionate, Master of the day of judgment. You alone we worship, and you alone we ask for help. She said she stopped reading after that. Not because she was confused, but because she wasn't. It was so simple, so clear, so direct that she felt tears streaming down her face. She told me, I didn't need to understand everything in that moment. I just knew. I found what I was looking for. This is the power of Islam's simplicity. It does not deny the mind's curiosity or discourage deep reflection, but it gives the heart a home before the mind even begins its questions. It starts with clarity. It starts with one God, one purpose, one direction. Imagine the relief of a traveler who has been walking through a desert with 100 different roads, not knowing which one to take, and suddenly finds a single, clear path stretching straight to an oasis. That is what many feel when they encounter Islam for the first time. And this simplicity isn't only in belief, it is woven into daily life. The prayer, for example, is not a ceremony locked in a sacred building or reserved for a priestly class. It is 5 short conversations with God wherever you are. In a workplace, in your bedroom, in the middle of an airport, you can turn to Him directly. No mediator, no permission needed. Just you and your Creator. That accessibility resonates deeply with people tired of feeling distant from God, tired of structures that make Him feel unreachable. Another convert once explained it to me this way. I didn't need to memorize volumes of theology to start. I didn't need to be perfect. All I had to say was the Shahada, that there is no God but God, and Muhammad is His messenger. And from there, everything else began to make sense. She described it like walking into a room where all the furniture was messy and scattered, and someone just switched on the light. Suddenly, everything was visible, everything in its place. That is what simplicity does. It brings clarity where there was once confusion. Even non-Muslims who study Islam often remark on how straightforward the fundamentals are. You believe in one God, you pray to Him. You give to those in need. You fast to discipline your soul. You make a pilgrimage if you can. 5 pillars, 5 anchors, 5 steps that ground you. And yet, in those simple steps lies a lifetime of transformation. Isn't it interesting how the simplest things are often the most profound? Breathing, for example, is the simplest act, but it keeps you alive. Islam's message is the same simple, but life-giving. And in a world drowning in overcomplication, that simplicity is magnetic. People are weary of contradictions, of shifting moralities, of endless debates that offer no real answers. They want truth that a child can understand, but wisdom that a scholar can spend a lifetime exploring. Islam offers both. It tells you that the same God who created the galaxies is the one who hears your whispered prayers at night. The same God who controls the rise and fall of empires is the one who knows when a tear falls from your eye. Simple, yet infinitely deep. That is why Islam spreads. Because when the human soul hears that simplicity, it recognizes it as something it already knew, but had forgotten. It is not foreign, it is home. And when you find home, you don't need convincing. You just walk through the door. Picture a prayer hall just before the call to prayer. Shoes lined up outside, the air heavy with silence. And then, as the words, Allahu Akbar, echo, people begin to stand shoulder to shoulder. Look closely. A businessman in an expensive tailored suit stands beside a construction worker with dust still clinging to his clothes. A young student, barely 19, stands beside an elder with silver in his beard. A man with dark skin from Africa presses his shoulder against a man with pale skin from Europe. There are no name tags, no labels. No one asks, how much do you earn? What car do you drive? Where did you graduate from? In that moment, they are equals, servants standing before their Creator. That scene right there explains a secret about Islam that the world often overlooks. We live in a time where society is obsessed with status. Your worth is measured by the brand on your shoes, the number in your bank account, or the degrees on your wall. People chase status, fight for it, and sometimes even destroy themselves trying to keep it. But Islam flips that idea on its head. In Islam, your worth is not measured by wealth, race, or power. It is measured by your heart, by your sincerity, by your faith. The Quran states it clearly. Indeed, the most honored of you in the sight of God is the one with the most righteousness. Imagine how liberating that is. Suddenly, the things people spend their lives competing over, money, fame, beauty, fade into the background. What matters most is invisible, unquantifiable, and deeply personal. I remember hearing the story of Bilal ibn Rabah, a former slave in Arabia. He was dark-skinned, poor, and considered among the lowest in society. Yet he was chosen by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, to be the first caller to prayer, the voice that would summon people to worship 5 times a day. Imagine that a man who once had chains around his neck, now standing on rooftops with his voice echoing across the city, proclaiming the greatness of God. It wasn't his wealth that elevated him. It wasn't his lineage. It was his faith, his devotion, his heart. That story alone is enough to show why Islam continues to touch souls today. It honors the very people the world overlooks. Think of Malcolm X, who once confessed to holding deep prejudice in his heart. He described traveling to Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, where he stood in prayer beside men with blue eyes and blonde hair, eating from the same plates, drinking from the same cups. He wrote that he saw people treating each other as equals, as true brothers. It forced me to rearrange much of my thought patterns. He said, for him, Islam dismantled the walls of racism and gave him a new lens, a lens of equality. Doesn't that resonate with you? Haven't you ever wished for a place where you weren't judged for what you wear, where you live, or how you look? Islam offers exactly that. In every mosque, in every prayer line, there is a reminder before God, we are the same. A king cannot step ahead of a servant in prayer. A millionaire cannot buy his way to the front row. Everyone bows, everyone prostrates, everyone lowers themselves to the ground in the same way. Can you imagine the humility in that? Can you feel the beauty of it? And it doesn't stop in the mosque. That equality spills into everyday life. Islam commands fairness in business, reminding traders not to cheat the poor. It instructs leaders to serve, not dominate. It protects the orphan, the widow, the marginalized, reminding society that power is a trust, not a privilege. In fact, the Prophet said, your servants are your brothers. Feed them what you eat, clothe them what you wear. Do not burden them with what they cannot bear. These weren't just words. They were a revolution in a world where the poor were invisible and the weak disposable. This is why people are drawn to Islam. Because in a world that divides us into categories and boxes, Islam removes the labels. In a time where people are desperate to feel seen, Islam says, God already sees you, and He doesn't see your salary or your skin. He sees your heart. And maybe that is why Islam continues to grow, because it touches a universal longing, the longing to belong, to be valued not for what you own, but for who you are at your core, to be part of a community where the janitor can stand beside the CEO, where a woman in simple clothes can sit beside a scholar, and both are honored for the sincerity in their prayers. That kind of equality isn't just theory, it's lived, felt, breathed. It's the reason that when people step into a mosque for the first time, they often leave with tears in their eyes. They sense something they never felt before, a place where they don't need to prove their worth, a place where their soul is enough. And maybe, just maybe, that's the equality the world has been searching for all along. There is a moment in almost every human life when silence grows loud. It's the silence of a restless heart, the silence of a soul asking questions it cannot ignore. Why am I here? What is my purpose? What happens when I die? We bury these questions under work, entertainment, and noise, but they always return, usually in the quiet hours of the night or in moments of crisis when life shakes us awake. People try to answer them with philosophy, with science, with personal theories, but too often the answers feel incomplete, leaving a gnawing emptiness inside. This is where Islam enters, not with vague metaphors or endless speculation, but with clarity. Islam dares to confront the very questions most people are afraid to face. When someone asks, "Why am I here?" Islam answers, "You are here to worship God, to recognize Him as your creator, and to live in a way that reflects justice, mercy, and humility." That single statement lifts the fog. Suddenly life is not a random accident or a cruel joke. It is a test, a journey with meaning, with direction, with accountability. I once spoke to a man who had spent years searching for answers in different religions and philosophies. He told me, "Everywhere I looked, I found pieces, but nothing whole. It was like trying to put together a puzzle with missing parts." When he read the Qur'an, he said it felt different. It wasn't a book of theories, he explained. It was a voice speaking directly to me. It told me why I was created, what my responsibilities are, and where I am going. For the first time, the puzzle was complete. His words capture what so many feel. Islam doesn't leave you wandering. It gives you a map. And then comes the next question. What happens after death? Islam answers without hesitation. Death is not the end. It is a transition. Just as we move from the womb to this world, we will move from this world to the next. There will be accountability, justice, and mercy. For the one who lived with sincerity and faith, paradise awaits. For the one who turned away, consequences follow. This is not meant to scare, but to prepare, to remind us that every choice carries weight. It gives death meaning, and in doing so, it gives life urgency. I remember a woman who lost her child telling me how she found peace in Islam's answer to the question of the afterlife. She said, "Before, I thought my daughter was just gone, like a candle blown out. But Islam taught me she is not lost. She is waiting in a place more beautiful than I can imagine. And if I remain patient, I will meet her again." That single belief carried her through her grief. Isn't that the kind of hope humanity is starving for? Not just comfort, but purpose even in pain. And what about morality? In the modern world, people are told that right and wrong are relative, that truth is just an opinion. But deep down, we all know certain things are universally wrong: injustice, oppression, cruelty. Islam provides a moral compass rooted not in shifting human desires, but in divine wisdom. It says, stand for justice even if it is against yourself. Feed the hungry, care for the orphan, honor your parents, respect your neighbors. One verse of the Quran summarizes it so beautifully. God commands justice, kindness, and giving to relatives, and forbids immorality, wrongdoing, and oppression. Imagine if humanity lived by just that one verse. A young college student once told me she converted to Islam after reading about the clear moral code it provided. She said, I was tired of being told that nothing mattered, that I could live however I wanted with no consequences. It felt empty. Islam gave me boundaries, but those boundaries gave me freedom. For the first time, I knew how to live with integrity. Her story is not unusual. Discipline, clarity, and purpose often attract people more than indulgence ever can. The answers Islam gives are not abstract. They touch daily life. When someone is suffering, Islam says there is wisdom in every trial, that patience raises your status, and that no tear falls unnoticed by God. When someone is blessed, Islam says give thanks, share, and remember that wealth is a trust, not a trophy. When someone feels lost, Islam says God is closer to you than your jugular vein. These aren't empty phrases. They are answers that anchor the human soul. And perhaps the most powerful part is how personal it feels. The Qur'an doesn't read like a distant manual. It feels like a conversation. People often describe it as if the words were written just for them, as if God is speaking directly into their hearts. That intimacy is what changes lives. It transforms doubts into faith, despair into hope, and emptiness into fulfillment. So when we say Islam is the fastest growing religion, it is not because of numbers or strategies. It is because of answers, real answers. Answers that silence the restless questions and fill the void that so many carry. Answers that turn life from a meaningless drift into a purposeful journey. And once you taste that clarity, once you feel that peace, you cannot unknow it. You cannot go back to wandering. You have found home. When people first encounter Islam, they often notice something striking. It isn't just a set of beliefs tucked away in the corner of one's mind. It's a way of life, a rhythm, a structure, a discipline that shapes the hours of the day, the months of the year, the very way you breathe and move through the world. For many, that discipline is the doorway to transformation. Imagine waking up before dawn while the rest of the world sleeps. The streets are quiet, the sky still cloaked in night. And in that stillness, you stand, whispering words of prayer, connecting directly with the one who gave you life. At first, it feels like a struggle. Your body aches for more sleep. Your mind tells you to stay under the blanket. But you rise anyway. And when you finish, something inside you shifts. You feel lighter, stronger. You realize you've won a battle before the day even began. That daily discipline is one of the most profound gifts of Islam. It trains you to master yourself instead of being mastered by your whims. I once heard a man describe his first Ramadan after converting to Islam. He said, "I didn't think I could do it. No food, no water, from sunrise to sunset, impossible." But as the days passed, he discovered something miraculous. Hunger gave him empathy. Thirst taught him patience. The simple act of abstaining from what he desired most, food, drink, comfort, broke chains he didn't even know he carried. He said, "I learned that I don't need everything I thought I needed. I learned that my soul is stronger than my stomach." By the end of the month, he wasn't just fasting from food, he was fasting from anger, from gossip, from selfishness. That's the transformation Ramadan was designed to bring. And it isn't just about rituals. Islam weaves discipline into the fabric of daily life in ways that touch every corner of the heart. When you earn money, you don't hoard it. You give a portion away in charity, purifying what you keep. And that act, repeated year after year, reshapes the way you see wealth. Suddenly, money isn't just a personal possession, it's a trust, a responsibility, a tool to uplift others. Isn't that the kind of discipline our world desperately needs? A discipline that fights greed, that trains generosity into the human heart. Think of the small choices we all face every day. The temptation to lie just to save face. The pull to cut corners when no one's watching. The urge to lash out when anger surges. Islam doesn't ignore those battles. It arms you for them. It reminds you that every action matters, that integrity is not optional, that your character is your real measure. And in practicing that discipline, you begin to see yourself differently. You begin to become someone you respect. Even the discipline of prayer, repeated 5 times a day, is more than just ritual. It's recalibration. You might start your day stressed, caught in deadlines and worries, but then the call to prayer comes and you pause. You turn away from the noise, and in those moments you realign with your purpose. Then, a few hours later, when you've drifted again into the chaos of work and distractions, another prayer calls you back. It's as though life is a spinning compass, and prayer is the steady hand that keeps you facing north. Can you imagine what happens to a soul that lives in that rhythm day after day, year after year? Transformation isn't just possible, it's inevitable. I once read the words of a woman who accepted Islam after a long search for meaning. She said, "I was always chasing freedom. I thought freedom was doing whatever I wanted, but that only led to emptiness. When I found Islam, I learned that real freedom comes from discipline, because discipline freed me from myself." That paradox is at the heart of Islam. By learning to control your desires, you are no longer controlled by them. By submitting to God, you are no longer enslaved by the world. And maybe that's why so many people are drawn to Islam today. In a society that encourages indulgence, Islam offers restraint. In a culture that praises self-interest, Islam calls for sacrifice. In a world that feels scattered and chaotic, Islam builds order and clarity. Discipline is not a burden, it's a path to liberation. The truth is, transformation doesn't come from a single moment of inspiration. It comes from small, consistent acts of discipline. It comes from the choice to wake before dawn, to fast when no one else is fasting, to give when no one is watching, to forgive when every part of you wants revenge. That's the secret Islam holds out to the world. And once someone tastes it, their life is never the same. Imagine for a moment that you are searching for truth. You've read books, listened to speakers, compared philosophies, and still something feels incomplete. Every path seems to twist, every source contradicts, every answer feels like it has been edited by human hands, adjusted to fit a culture, a century, or a leader's agenda. And then you come across something astonishing, a book that has not changed in over 400 years. Not a single word, not a single letter. You pause and wonder, how is that even possible? In a world where even yesterday's news can't be trusted, how can a book remain untouched for more than a millennium? That is the Qur'an. People don't realize how rare this is. Look at history. Ancient scriptures have been revised, edited, and translated so many times that scholars debate over what was original and what was added centuries later. Entire councils were held to vote on which parts to keep and which to discard. Chapters disappeared. Meanings shifted. Languages evolved and took truth along with them. But the Quran stands apart. From the moment it was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, until this very day, it has been recited, memorized, and preserved word for word. If you travel from Cairo to Kuala Lumpur, from Istanbul to London, you will hear the exact same recitation. A shepherd in Nigeria can recite the same verses as a scholar in Medina without a difference in sound or meaning. Isn't that remarkable? And it's not just memory, it's miracle. The Quran was revealed in a society where literacy was rare, yet people memorized entire chapters with precision. Today, millions around the world, including children as young as 7, know it by heart from cover to cover. No other book in history can claim this. Imagine walking into a gathering where 10 children, none of whom speak Arabic as a native language, can each recite hundreds of pages perfectly. That's not just memory, it's living proof. The Quran is not kept alive in ink on paper, it's carried in the hearts of human beings. I once heard the story of a man who converted to Islam after testing this for himself. He bought a copy of the Quran, compared it with different versions from around the world, and realized they were identical. He said, "When I held that book, I felt like I was holding something eternal, something no hand had dared to touch or tamper with." That was the moment his search ended. Because deep down, people long for authenticity. They long for something they can trust, something pure and unaltered. The Quran gives them that. Think about it. In a time when fake news spreads faster than truth, when social media can manipulate opinions with a single headline, when even textbooks are rewritten to fit politics, people crave certainty. And when they encounter the Qur'an, they see more than just a religious text. They see constancy in a world of chaos. They see a book that has withstood empires rising and falling, kings and dictators, wars and revolutions. And yet it remains as it was. Inna nanu nazana aida dikra wa inna lahu la hafizan. Indeed, it is we who sent down the reminder, and indeed, we will preserve it. That promise of preservation wasn't just spoken. It has been witnessed for 14 centuries. Now picture a seeker sitting with the Qur'an for the first time. They open its pages expecting maybe poetry, maybe laws, maybe philosophy. But then they read verses that speak directly to their doubts, directly to their fears. And we have certainly made the Qur'an easy to remember. So, is there anyone who will be mindful? They feel as though the book is speaking to them, not just about God, but from God. And they wonder, how could a book revealed in the 7th century speak to my 21st century heart with such precision? That question becomes the seed of faith. The Qur'an doesn't just preserve words, it preserves impact. It isn't simply recited, it transforms. People who never believed in God have opened its pages and felt something they couldn't explain. Scientists have read verses about the universe, the oceans and human creation and stood stunned at their accuracy. Poets have read its language and admitted no human could craft such power. And ordinary people, broken and searching, have read its words and wept because it felt like the book had been written just for them. That is authenticity, not just in text, but in timeless relevance. So when people say Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world, they often overlook this reason. The Qur'an itself is the magnet. It doesn't need marketing campaigns or flashy advertisements. It simply needs to be opened, to be heard, to be felt. Because once someone realizes they are holding a book that has never been touched by human alteration, a book that carries a promise of divine preservation, a book that still speaks as clearly today as it did 400 years ago, they understand. They see what seekers before them saw. They see what converts today see. They see that the search for authenticity ends here. And perhaps that is why, no matter where you go, no matter how many barriers are built, the Qur'an keeps calling hearts. Because authenticity cannot be hidden. Truth cannot be buried. And a book preserved by God Himself cannot be forgotten. When people talk about Islam, they often focus on rituals, laws, and history. But if you listen closely to those who embrace it, they almost always describe something far simpler, far deeper: peace. Not just the absence of conflict, but the stillness that finally quiets the storms inside. Imagine carrying a weight on your shoulders for years. Worries, regrets, unanswered questions, and then suddenly it's lifted. That moment, that release, is what countless new Muslims describe when they talk about finding Islam. One man told his story in a way that stuck with me forever. He had spent years searching, reading philosophy, chasing success, trying to fill the void with everything the modern world offered. He said, "I achieved things that should have made me happy, but every night I lay in bed with the same emptiness." Then one evening, a friend invited him to a mosque. He watched ordinary people line up in prayer, bowing in unison, whispering words in a language he didn't even understand. Yet he said, "For the first time in my life, my heart felt quiet." That night, he couldn't stop thinking about it. Days later, he embraced Islam. When asked why, he didn't say it was about rules or debates or proofs. He said, "I was tired of noise. Islam gave me peace." That word, peace, comes from the very name of the faith. Islam shares its root with the word salam, which literally means peace. It is not a coincidence. The faith itself is designed to bring the human soul back to its natural state of harmony. In a world that constantly pulls us in 100 directions, Islam calls us back to center. Think about the 5 daily prayers. They are like pauses built into the day. remind us to step out of the chaos and reconnect with what truly matters. A busy executive in New York, a farmer in Nigeria, a student in London, all stop, wash, and pray, returning their hearts to the same rhythm. Isn't that the kind of grounding every human being longs for? I once met a woman who described her conversion to Islam as finally coming home. She had lived her whole life searching for belonging. She tried different communities, different lifestyles, even different faiths. Nothing stuck. Then one day, she was invited to break fast with a Muslim family during Ramadan. She didn't know the traditions. She didn't know the prayers. But as she sat on the floor passing plates, watching them smile and whisper thanks to God before eating, she said she felt something she had never felt before. It was like my soul sighed in relief, she explained. I wasn't just in a room, I was home. Weeks later, she declared her faith, not because of a debate, but because of peace. The remarkable thing is how universal this experience is. A soldier in America, a scientist in Europe, a musician in South America, all describe the same sensation when they accept Islam, an inner calm, as if the puzzle pieces of their life suddenly fit together. One man described it by saying, I felt like I had been running my whole life, and Islam finally told me I could stop. That is the kind of peace no paycheck, no achievement, no recognition can buy. But what makes it so powerful is that it doesn't erase struggle. Life still throws challenges. Bills still pile up. Relationships still test patience. Yet those who find this peace say the difference is in how they face it. With faith, hardships become temporary trials, not crushing burdens. With belief in God's wisdom, pain becomes a path to growth, not meaningless suffering. With the promise of accountability and eternal life, even death transforms from terror into transition. Isn't that the deepest kind of peace? The ability to live through storms without being destroyed by them. One convert said, before Islam, when something went wrong, I felt like the world was collapsing. After Islam, when something goes wrong, I know God is with me and I can handle it. That shift from panic to patience, from despair to hope, is what makes Islam spread in hearts even faster than it spreads on maps. And maybe that's the secret. Islam doesn't just answer questions, it soothes the soul. It doesn't just teach rules, it offers rest. It doesn't just connect you to God, it anchors you in a peace the world cannot take away. In a society where people are drowning in anxiety, depression, and endless noise, Islam whispers a simple truth: be still. You are not alone. You were created with purpose, and you are loved by the one who made you. That whisper is enough to change a life. And that is why Islam continues to grow. Because in the end, every human being is searching for the same thing. And when they find it, they know. They know they are finally home. So now you know, Islam is not just growing because of numbers. It is growing because it touches hearts. It is growing because it gives answers. It is growing because it brings people home. And here's the truth: people are searching. Searching for peace. Searching for clarity. Searching for something that this noisy, restless world cannot give them. And every single day, Islam gives them what they've been longing for. Don't wait. Don't hesitate. Don't let another day pass in silence. If you know the truth, share it. If you feel the peace, live it. If you've opened the door, invite others in. Say it once. Say it again. Say it until it echoes in every heart. Islam is not just a religion, it is peace. Islam is not just a belief, it is a way of life. Islam is not just growing, it is awakening the world. This is not someone else's moment. This is your moment. This is your chance to be part of history, to be part of the light, to be part of the truth that no headline, no prejudice, no barrier can ever stop. And remember this final line: Islam isn't just the fastest growing religion in the world. It is the fastest growing homecoming of the human soul.